Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Internet Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. Very good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 27th of January 2012 and as usual, myself and Steve were so busy chatting away, we just lost track of time. So just got in at the nick of time, didn't we, Steve?
Yeah, we're just sitting, actually, to be completely honest, we're just sitting here yapping away, and then Alan says, it's 7:01. And we go, geez, we haven't even got the headphones on or nothing.
So we had a big rush and get organised. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining. I see people in the chat facility already. That's fantastic. Right, our guest on tonight is a lady called Dr. Joye Jefferies Pugh, I think is her last name. She's an author of 3 books, and we're going to be bringing Joy in about 15-20 minutes. But for now, what we'll do is we'll find out what the communication channels are.
Yes, communication channels, info@oymIreland.com for your emails throughout the show and also throughout the week. We also have the guest book on the website as well. You can leave a message in there. We have the chat facility up and running. And hopefully you all have your own names, because I know there was a problem with the names. So Alan has done a little bit of housekeeping on that during the day. So that's up and running now. Say a big hello to everyone that's already logged in. If you're listening to us on one of the other streams, you can navigate your way to OYMIreland.com. On the top left of the page, you will see live chat. You can hit that button and you can log in with your real name or a pseudonym. You can join in the chat there with the other listeners, and you can also post questions to our special guest this evening, or you can give us a call on the landline by...
Give us a call on 046 927 1212.
Yes, by giving us a call on the 046 927 1212. If you're ringing in from outside Republic of Ireland, it's 00353 in front of that. Alan.
Okay, right, Steve. One of the things we just want to talk about briefly is the donations. We're near enough there. We're near enough to getting our target for the bumper stickers. We're about €50 short of getting our target for the bumper stickers. Now, we're going to be obviously donating to that as well, because there's other extra costs that would have to be factored in. But for the donations on the actual website, we just need another €50, and then we can start ordering the bumper stickers, get them in, and start selling them on the website. And just get everybody, hopefully a nationwide campaign, where everybody having a sticker on the car with I'm awake. I mean, it's not just about putting a sticker on a car. It's about saying to people that you know what's going on. You're awake to it. And when people see the sticker on your car, they can approach you, and hopefully people will, and go, oh, I see you have a sticker on your car, you're aware of what's going on. And then you start a conversation, because sometimes it can be quite lonely. When, like if you're the only person amongst all the sheep that are awake and know what's going on, and everybody thinks you're mad. You know what you say? Intelligent people are seen as crazy people by dumb people. So some people will think you're mad. There's a lot of sheeple out there still. So you need to have kind of a unity with your fellow brethren who are woken up to what's going on. So that's the thing with the I'm awake stickers. So we need your support. So if you can, give us what you can, small or big, whatever. As I say, another €50 is going to get us to get to the target. And then what we can do is we can get the bumper stickers printed. And hopefully I'd love to see stickers on the majority of cars in Ireland. It'd be fantastic. But so that's, if you can donate, that'd be fantastic. I know it's just after Christmas and money's tight. So, but, books, if you can't donate, maybe if somebody buys a book or a souvenir or something like that, it all goes towards helping the funding anyway. So that'd be fantastic. Steve.
And also the adverts that we have, we're kind of using the system. I know we kind of talk about the system, and we kind of, we say what we say, but we do have ads up on the site there as well. So if you don't have any, if you can't donate but you'd like to help, just click on one of the ads. It takes just a second or two, and then if anyone who's familiar with the Google adverts, we get a couple of cents. It goes kind of into the coffer. So anything that we get from that, we're putting into the bumper sticker campaign also. What was I going to say? Yeah, Ireland's Independence Day, for anyone who doesn't know. I'm sure everyone does by now. It was last Monday, 21st of January. So we're going to say a happy belated Independence Day to all of you. But yeah, that happened at the Mansion House, 21st Monday at midday, and there's a couple of videos going around YouTube of Billy Maguire, and also the Lord Mayor of Dublin, whose name I cannot pronounce, and I won't even try because it sounds like a foreign name. But they stood on the steps and they read out the Independence Day proclamation. I'm sure that's not the right word for it, but it was read out on the steps by the Lord Mayor, and Billy Maguire was there, and Harry was also there, seeing Harry in the background. And a little bit of interesting trivia about the whole Independence Day on Monday was that seemingly Mr. Maguire received a letter on the office of Antishok asking him not to tell people. I think basically in layman's terms it was, don't start telling people that this is going on. They don't need to know. Now, well, I don't know what you make of that, but maybe that's what happened. But unfortunately, neither Alan or I could attend the ceremony. I think we mentioned it last week because Alan was busy doing his thing and I was busy doing my thing. But Alan did send out a message to all of his contacts, everyone in his contact book and his little black book. Well, it's a big black book actually. To make everyone aware of the Independence Day. We also want to say a belated happy birthday to Andrew and also Vin. That's Andrew and Vin from TNS Radio. Alan did pop over to Andrew on the night of the 21st and helped him celebrate the anniversary of his birthday. I think some alcohol was involved. I'm not sure.
Not from my side, but donations were put in. But so there's a question here from Crown Copyright. Did the Irish Provisional Government write to Billy saying not to publish it? Well, it was the government that's in now. So that's the provisional government as far as I'm concerned. So yes, it looks like that's the case.
There's actually copies of the letter that Billy Maguire received. There's 3 copies of correspondence, and one of them is a letter from the office of Antishok.
Yeah, it was amazing that that mansion house can be used for so many things with people going in and out. But as soon as it's for Independence Day, it's health and safety. But for everything else, it's fine. But just for the Independence Day, it's health and safety. Very convenient that. But you want to chat about the Russian thing, don't you?
Allegedly, I do.
You do, apparently.
Yeah, I wasn't there, mind you, but I think everyone has probably seen it at this stage. I won't assume, but if you haven't seen it, go check it out or look for it anyway. It happened in Sofia, in Bulgaria, where there was a guy come up on the stage. It's some politician. I'm not too up on their political system, so I don't know if the politician giving the talk was a good guy or a bad guy or what he stood for, or whether he was on the left or on the right or what. But say a guy is actually seen on the video running up to him, pointing a gun at his head and pulling the trigger. The guy who was the trigger puller was kind of seen a little bit put out that the gun didn't go off, and the guy who would have been dead, it looked like he nearly he nearly ruined his underpants. With that, there was another plethora of gentlemen, looked like bouncers and bodyguards, come up onto the stage and they accosted the shooter, wrestled him to the ground, and while he was on the ground and he was getting held down, he wasn't going anywhere. It was like a queue formed and people were coming up and kicking him, punching him. There was even one guy, I think we seen came up from the audience. It looked like a walking stick or a walking cane of some description in his hand, and he even went in. I'd say the guy was probably in his 70s. He even went in with the walking cane and just got a couple of digs in there. But I would say after the camera stopped rolling, that guy was probably taken out the back, and I'd say he was beaten to within an inch of his life.
I'd say so. When you see everybody bailing in and the crowd mentality that everybody's kicking him, so I'm going to go up and give him a kicking as well,
Yeah. Mike says it was an air pistol. Yeah, we heard that it was some class. It wasn't even a real gun as such.
Exactly. So that was that was an interesting video. The other thing that happened during the week. Now, myself and Steve run a few websites, and there was over 20,000 plus websites hacked during the week from a hacking group regarding a cause, one of their causes. Now, I'm not going to mention who the group was, and I'm not going to even mention their cause, for the simple reason being that going around hacking websites to try and get your cause advertised is not the way to do it. In all honesty, I'm sure if this group actually approached the alternative media and asked to highlight the issues or problems they had, we would have been more than happy to do that. But to go around and start defacing and hacking innocent websites when things are as bad as they are with trying to get business, I think is just way beyond the joke. You know, I condone any attacks like that, and Steve does as well. We both do, because a couple of our sites were actually hacked. We spent a couple of hours sorting them out and tidying them up. So, you know, for whatever the cause was, it actually has a reverse effect. So I refuse, and we refuse, to talk about it and mention what the cause was, because that's not the way to do it, guys. You know, you don't go around doing that. You just, you know, that's why we have social media and Facebook and alternative media radio stations, to get your message out there. So they didn't like that at all. So that was really the issues that happened during the week. There's a few other things as well, but how's your week, Steve?
My week has been fine. It's you know, productive enough week. Something we kind of kicked around during the week, and I just wanted to. I told Alan I was going to mention it this evening, so I'm going to mention it. We did receive an email during the week. Most of the time, the emails are generally positive, and I have to say, the one that we received during the week, it wasn't completely negative. However, it was kind of like someone getting me and kind of giving me a little bit of a shaking and saying, hang on a second, have you forgotten what you stand for? And this is basically in relation to comments I made last week that were my own personal comments and didn't reflect Alan's and didn't reflect OYM as a whole, but it was comments I made in relation to Direct Democracy Ireland. I was saying that they were kind of the way forward and I would be supporting them and all that sort of stuff. It was brought to my attention during the week that normally what we say is we sit on the fence. We try and give a balanced viewpoint of both sides. And after we received the email, I kind of realised that maybe I wasn't so much sitting on the fence when I made those comments. So I do want to apologise if it was taken out of context or if anyone was offended in any way, shape or form by the comments. But I'm firmly back on the fence. My ass is nailed to the fence here this evening, so I'm going to stay on the fence. And all I would say is that the cause, not the cause, but the direct democracy way, from what we've seen, seems to work. So I don't think it would matter who would be implementing direct democracy in the country, on the island. I think once the people have a proper say in the running of matters and are consulted when they need to be consulted, and not have shady deals done behind their back, I think if it was even Enda Kenny, if him and his party were kind of peddling direct democracy, it wouldn't make a difference. I think it's the direct democracy is what works, and not the people, so much the people who are actually pushing the issue.
The thing is, Steve, that the oligarchs will not vote a system that goes against themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that goes without saying. Mm. But yeah, so therefore, I'm back on the fence anyway, and I think direct democracy would work. That's my opinion anyway, and no matter who's implementing it, I think that could be the way forward. Hmm. If I get out of line again, just give me a smack in the chops.
Well, I mean, both of us did it, but it's just out of desperation because we see what the current parties are doing to the country. So, DDI is like a breath of fresh air, to be honest with you, but, should any other party decide to use the same system, bring it in. But the trouble is, you can't trust them, because as soon as they tell you, oh yeah, we'll do that, and they get the vote, then that's it, they just forget about you. So, even if they did bring it in, I'd still be sceptical. But anyway, so, anything else happen your week?
Yeah, I've been, I mentioned there, and I have mentioned for the past couple of weeks, about the whole Sandy Hook issue, and more information is coming to light almost on a daily basis. And I was actually watching some video footage this morning, and I was just discussing it with Alan when I came up, and it was shocking because this was an actual broadcast that was aired on CNN, and I showed it to my wife there this morning, and even when she seen the guy in it, she said, oh, I remember I seen him getting interviewed on one of the news channels. But the news channel that he was on for this particular interview was CNN. The guy was in the background. I don't know if he realised that the camera had already started rolling, but his name was Robbie. I can't remember his surname. I don't know if anyone else has seen it. But he's having a laugh and a joke in the background, and he looks like a man who doesn't have a worry or a care in the world. And then as soon as the camera starts rolling, you can still see him laughing and joking in the background. Then he walks forward, and he still has a big grin on his face. He then stops, and I've seen people acting before, and some members of my family are involved in that way, acting. But the guy, he's laughing and joking a moment, then he stops, and it looked from what I could say like somebody getting into character. And after about maybe 10, 12 seconds, he was in character, and he then just kind of started saying, "Hi, my name is Robbie. My daughter was one of the innocent victims, and she was killed yesterday." I'm thinking, Jesus. It was acting. I'm sorry, I don't. You'd have to see it to believe it. But the guy was definitely. He was an actor. There's no way. I mean, if that had happened to any father, he would be traumatized for days. I mean, I'm still not convinced. As I say, if I'm shown to be wrong and it did happen, well, I've nothing but condolences or condolences with the families. But from what we're seeing, and even I believe mainstream media are now. In the US, some of the mainstream media channels are actually kind of looking at it now, and they're even beginning to think that the pieces of the jigsaw, they're just not fitting together. And Lord Vapor has the name up there, Robbie Parker, but it was just unbelievable. That's pretty much all I've been doing. I've been kind of doing a few other bits during the week. I've been checking out some other videos, and I've been kind of tic-tacking with a few people. This new film coming out, I don't know if you heard about it, is September Morn. It's supposed to be the aftermath of 9/11, I believe. Not Charlie Sheen, sorry, Martin Sheen is in it. It's also, there's the voice of the late Carl Malden, and there's, what's the other chap's name? Woody Harrelson of Cheers, he's in it as well. I believe that's an absolutely brilliant film. It's gotten rave reviews. However, people are talking about it should be banned because it's not conforming to the official report. Yeah. So I'm actually waiting to see that. I'm dying to see that one. But other than that, just my week's been busy. How about you?
Just a few things on the go. I was watching Catherine Albrecht during the week regarding, she's the RFID lady. And one of the things she talks about, obviously she's talking about, the problems with making cash payments because everything's getting digital. And she speaks about the book of Revelations, the Mark of the Beast. And it does say in the book of Revelations, and maybe we'll be talking to Joy about this later on when we get her on. It says here, he also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that none could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. And of course, what do credit cards have? A number. And this is what she was talking about, and she drills down and goes into all the psychology and the whole thing about the credit cards and the mark of the beast and how they're going to do it and what they're going to do. So we're going to try and get her on the show. Oh, she's a very busy woman, but we're going to do our best to try and get her on. So the other thing that was happened during the week, which I was very proud of, was, as you know, we had snow over here, over in Ireland, and in the UK they had snow over there. And my son's classmates wanted to go out and play in the snow, like we did when we were younger, but apparently they don't do it now because of health and safety. So all the kids got together and did a partition and signed it and left it on the teacher's desk, demanding that they go out for lunch break. And my son said to me, are you upset because I've done it? And I said, are you joking? I said, I'm very proud of you. I said, at the age of 11, standing up for your rights, everybody in the class, and knowing what's right and wanting to go out and do it. I said, that's fantastic. So, it's great to see the kids having the independence, doing that, putting a petition together, signing it, and then putting it on the teacher's desk, to the teacher. Now, obviously, the teacher wouldn't have got it. She just wouldn't have got it. And she would have said health and safety. But the fact that at that age, doing that, it's really, really good. I was really proud of him when he told me that, You
see, obviously, as the old saying goes, you're not teaching him what to think, you're teaching him how to think.
Exactly.
He's using his own logic and Fair play.
Well, I always say to him, ask questions. Don't just accept. Ask the questions. But so that was, very good of his classmates and, all of them involved doing that. And the last thing on the list is, I don't know whether you've seen the news during the week, just thought we'd mention it there. Russia orders Obama, tell world about aliens or we will. And basically it's a stunning Ministry of Foreign Affairs report on Prime Minister's Medvedev's, is that how you pronounce his name?
Here. I don't
Russian
know.
Prime Minister, anyway, Medvedev.
Slobodon, something, yeah.
Yeah, agenda at the World Economic Forum this week states that Russia will warn President Obama that the time has come for the world to know the truth about aliens, and if the United States won't participate in the announcement, the Kremlin will do so on its own. Now, people might be asking, why are they really waiting on the States to do it? Well, you've probably heard with guests on the show before that America was handed over all the responsibility for that. All the countries said, let the Yanks do it. So, they're kind of in charge of that. But it's getting to the stage now that people know what's going on. They know they know what's going on. So, it's either going to be Russia or China, I reckon, they're going to come out and say something. As to how it's going to be done and what's going to be done and all that, I don't know, I haven't a clue. But if you type it in and Google it, it'll actually tell you that the Prime Minister of Russia has said to Obama, apparently, that you're going to have to come out and say something. So there you go. So listen, Joy is going to be on our Skype phone. So we don't have her online with Skype at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a little bit of music, and then we're going to get Joy on, and then we'll be back with you with Joy. So we'll catch you after this.
We're back. That was a little bit of Rainbow, and I surrender. I certainly do. How about you?
Oh, of course, no worries, all the time. Right, okay, we're just going to bring in our guest. We have, pleased to have Dr. Joye Jefferies Pugh. Good evening, Joy, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm just so glad to be on your show today, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you about my research.
No problem at all. Well, glad having you on there. Now, Dr. Joy, you're an author. I mean, you've got so many qualifications and you do so many things, and you can tell us about that. But basically, you've the books that we're interested in, 3 books which you've written was The Antichrist, the Cloned Image of Jesus Christ, Colours of Joy, and Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil 666, which is quite interesting, something that we just mentioned earlier. But give us a bit more background on who Dr. Joye Jefferies Pugh is.
Well, I received my doctorate back in the early, tell them how old I am, back in the early 1990s from Nova University, and I've been actively involved in research really regarding biblical prophecy, end times kind of research and that kind of thing. For really, again, telling my age, for a little bit over 40 years, and really if you go back and think about when I first had this dream that really started me into the research that I have been doing, that would take you back to 50 years of research. So I've been doing this a very long time, and of course my biography appears in Who's Who in the World and Who's Who in America, Who's Who in American Women and Who's Who in American Education, and I'm an active member of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and I'm also a composer. I write lyrics and music, and I have an album that's Before Time Stops, along with the books that you have already mentioned. And I'm presently finishing up a series called Beguiled, Eden to Armageddon, which is a 3-volume series that will probably come out in the next 3 to 4 months. So I enjoy doing end-time research, and that's really what I spend the majority of my hours and days over the course of many years being involved with.
Okay, brilliant. Well, let's get stuck straight into it. Just before you came on air, Joy, one of the things that I was talking about was the book of Revelations, 13, 16 to 17. Now, there's a lady in America called Catherine Albrecht, and she's called the RFID lady because she's trying to educate people about the dangers of RFID and the whole microchipping culture and the tagging and the mark of the beast 666. And on the book of Revelations, I have the saying here, he also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that none could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, what Catherine talks about is obviously the number being like a credit card number. That's the number. That's one of the numbers that we use, and that identifies us. You know, and people know when you use your credit card what you buy, where you bought it, you know, how many you bought. And she tries to avoid using credit cards. So, taking it from that side, the number of the beast, and I'm sure you're pretty familiar with the Book of Revelations and all the talk about good and evil and everything else. What's your take on that? What's your understanding of that?
Well, you know, all of my books, Antichrist, Cloning Image of Jesus Christ, and of course we'll be probably talking a lot about Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil, 666, because I spent a lot of time. It's like 482 pages, and 7 years of research went into that particular book, and so we're probably going to be dealing more in that book today when I talk to you. But that area is something that I go in great detail in Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil, because understanding the ability to buy, sell, or trade, according to what Revelation is telling us, is that there is a type of mark that is placed on a person, and they cannot be able to do anything really outside other than maybe if you stole or whatever to be able to get something. So we're coming to a time, and never before really in our history, this is amazing to me that really 2,000 years ago, when John of Patmos wrote the book of Revelation in such a prison situation that he was in as an old disciple, actually the only living disciple that was not really martyred. All the other disciples went to their deaths as martyrs. John lived into old age, and of course he was boiled in oil and a couple other things as far as being on the Isle of Patmos, but he absolutely saw this vision of what was going to happen in our time of life. I fully believe we're living in the generation that's seeing this. And like she has, tried to explain to people in regard to the radio frequency ID chips, before, we had, of course, when I first started doing this research a long time ago, we had no such thing as a card as far as being able to go down and use credit. Most everyone either had money in their pocket or they may have used a check. And when we moved into having credit cards and being able to process credit cards, it allowed electronic transfer of information, and it was at such a great speed that as we have become even more technological, we can look at now, we've got the smart card, we've got the debit card, we've got cards that are instantaneous, that we don't have to wait to have something processed and know immediately. Right now, if you go into a store and they slide a debit card over, they can tell you immediately whether you've got the cash available in your bank account or whether you do not have it. So it's in real time. So we've moved in the course of the last 30 years into the ability in real time to be able to stop you from being able to buy something. In other words, if it pulls up that you don't have the money available, then you can't purchase the product. Years ago, if you gave somebody a check, that check would probably take a week to get to the bank, and the bank would have to process it. And even in the days that I grew up, you could, write a check for 2 or 3 days later, and they would hold it until a certain time and then put it in so that you'd have the money to cover it. Those days are no longer here. And so everything is in real time. So if we look at that and we take, well, what could be the potential of taking this ability of an RFID chip and making it into something that would be very evil? Well, when we started looking at what was called barcodes, that's something else that never existed on products until ISO and International Standards Organization began to say if you're going to do trading internationally, that you're going to have these products that need a certain specification, first of all, but they're also going to have these marks and these ID numbers to be able to do major tracking. And so where, we had like the regular mail system and somebody mailed a package, it may take several weeks to get to you. Now you've got things like UPS, Federal Express, and of that nature, especially in the United States, that you can scan that and you can go online and you can watch your package being actually tracked to you, where it's going, where it's at, as far as when it changes hands from one station to the next. So again, this is all being done in real time. Now, like my research shows, the first radio frequency chips were really able to be placed inside of, they started out with animals. And the GPS system was another thing that had been available for ships for a long time. I can remember being on a cruise ship and having known one of the main, I guess, captains, being able to see how ships were actually navigated through the high seas back in the late 1980s. And when I saw that, I was amazed that was able to track that ship out there and control it, no different than we have, airplanes and that kind of stuff and black boxes and, being able to find that kind of thing. But how that manifested and became a GPS tracking system that at first, was something you could purchase and put in a car, and now available in cars and now available also on smartphones. So you've gone from something that was very archaic and very technical, I guess, for people, only certain things could do it, now to having everybody who has an iPhone able to, to use major tracking or use GPS. Well, when we were able to put that many satellites up above the Earth, then when they placed these radio frequency chips inside of, like, people or animals, and like I say, the animal thing was the really first thing because they started putting it in things and tracking things, like out in the ocean and whatever, and they were able to determine exactly the pinpoint location of that individual within, let's say, so many feet of when they tried to identify or get the frequency to ping. And what happens now, we have so many animals that are, actually have these things in them that we have now moved into putting them into people. And it's been a voluntary effort, and one of the big things in America has been to say, well, we want to put them in people who have Alzheimer's because, of course, if an Alzheimer's patient gets lost, then we can, of course, ping that RFID chip, and we can find them immediately. It's not something like they're going to be wandering around for days on end out in the middle of the swamp and we can't locate them. Now we can locate anybody. In fact, I have a friend who worries about his father, and he has a ping in his iPhone that if he's out hunting anywhere, if it's in even the Okefenokee Swamp, you can find the person. So we have gotten to the point now that we can locate a person. We can control, for whatever that person might be able to do in that area by being able to go and secure that person. So in other words, if you have this chip embedded within you and not in, let's say, a cell phone or an iPhone, you have got no way of escaping, first of all, being found. Then, second of all, if you go down to purchase anything, if that RFID chip were to be able to retain information, then instead of having to use, let's say, a credit card, a smart card, or whatever, the chip within you could be scanned because it's a radio frequency capability of using that information just like you do a credit card. So we have moved in the last 30 to 40 years, and, from something that started out just as a mere credit card, and there was always the situation that when the barcodes came out, that the three major barcodes themselves actually were the numbers 666 because the barcode is all numbers. In other words, that's how it's done. And there were a lot of people who were speculating that in fact, meant that the computer system of our system code was, in fact, a big computer system, and it was called the Beast. But Revelation does not tell us that. The Beast is actually a man, and it tells you the man's name is 666. So when you start thinking, well, if the 666 also goes along with the barcode being 6 and then numbers and then another big D barcode meaning 6 and then more numbers and then the last code meaning 6, then you can see how the information is being brought in to match what biblical scripture has told us is going to happen, and that is that it would have the same similarity as the name of the beast. Now, because technology has gotten so great, my research is even going to go much deeper in this new book series that I'm presently working on. I'm going to take you into the fact that there is a harmonic resonance that is within all of us. In other words, our very DNA has its own electromagnetic fingerprint. And right now on the market, there is capability of tattooing ink upon your skin that would allow it to be used as a scanning code. So in other words, you wouldn't necessarily have what we call the RFID chip that's presently available right now on the market, but you could go to having a tattooed situation on the skin. That will be probably from one step to the next, and then, of course, into what I'm going to be talking about in my new series in regarding the DNA and the individual fingerprints that we all have, because we are different just like snowflakes. No two snowflakes are alike. Therefore, no two DNA fingerprints are alike. And when DNA gives off its electromagnetic activity, then it can be encompassed and actually pinged. So that's a whole new kind of thought process. But going back, trying to answer your question, what this lady has said in the past, yes, is something that is happening that will only become a little bit more technological to the point that you cannot get away from it. In other words, where you might be able to right now, if you had a chip and you knew, let's say, that it was in your right hand, if you wanted to get that chip out of your body, you could literally surgically open it up and take it out. In my book, Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil, I went a step further, showing that you can take these RFID stamps, and because nanotechnology has gotten so more advanced and smaller, you can put, the entire Library of Congress on a pinhead. So, your information, as far as it being put on something that's almost what you can't see with your own eyes, as far as nanotechnology, and then the fact that nanotechnology also has robotic capability that can actually take something and put it in your body and then move it through your system, through your bloodstream and lodge it somewhere. And my concern has always been that because I truly believe the pineal gland in the forehead of every human being has an antenna capability, and I go into great detail about this in Eden, is that if you can take this substance of information and place it in a nanotechnology type of robotic capability, you could lodge that within the antenna of the pineal gland. And if you did that, you could surgically never be able to remove it. And that is something that, if you think about when it says the mark of the beast, not the capability to buy, sell, or trade, that if you take that mark that you can never enter into heaven, that it has something to do with the ability to communicate really with God. And the pineal gland is the seat of the soul. And I think that there is where there's a shut-off that happens between having the mark and not having the mark. So there's a lot happening in this field. I mean, we're, like I say, recently, I guess maybe a couple of years ago, it was mandated for horses in America to be all, chipped. And you've got a lot of dogs and cats doing the Alzheimer's patients and things of that nature. And then one of the biggest pushes to push this into a concept that you can't get away from as far as America, Obama's presidential campaign has been to really have universal kind of health care for America. But a part of this health care for America, it is saying that you're going to have within your body these RFID chips. And what happens, Alan, is when you go into the hospital right now, especially in America, where everything used to be like handwritten or typed or transcribed, and they would take and put you a bracelet on your arm, and then, they come in and check and say, who's your name, what is your name, what's your birthday. Now they take a scanner, and they scan the bracelet that's on your arm. And then in the last year, all the hospitals, especially in my area of the country, have all put in these new computers. And now they print you out programs when you go in to see a doctor that anybody can pull from that particular hospital. But what's going to happen is it's all the same type of program. So it will be universally tied in, so that if you go to the doctor and you, let's say, get pills from Dr. A, where people could in the past go to Dr. B, Dr. C, and Dr. D and get the same pills within the same week, they're able to now say, oh, no, you can't have this and this and this. And you'll be able to bring it down to the point that you can't even have a Band-Aid unless you have the scanning capability. And as a part of his healthcare program, it is for you to have this RFID chip in your body, and that they're going to scan you that way. And if you don't have it, then no service. So when you start thinking about health care, it's one of those things that people, they panic when they get sick. That is a real push to lock you in to having to have this frequency chip put in your body. So it's being set up so that eventually it moves people in the direction you in my research, and that is to show you that it's locked into your DNA.
Definitely. Well, that's covers quite a lot. But yeah, you're right. The one thing they'll do is obviously offer it voluntary, and then what they'll do is say, well, maybe you should put it in your granny's Alzheimer's and give her the chip, and so if she goes out wandering, we can track her down. And that's the kind of the way they're going to try and get it in, and before you know it, then it'll be compulsory. And if you don't have this chip, you won't be able to get treated in a hospital. And that's really the plan of attack. But what I want to do is move away a little bit from the RFID, because that's a massive subject in itself. And I just want to generally cover really your thoughts on a number of things. Now, for myself, I'm just speaking personally here for myself. I'm a spiritual person as opposed to a religious person, because my own opinion on religion, and this is just my opinion, is that religion is man-made to control man. And I think there's a difference between God and religion, or your perception of God, because people might call it not God, they might call it the source, for want of another name. Now, there's a lot of talk, and they always say you should never talk about politics and religion, but we're just going to be, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here for the sake for tonight for the interview. And I have read stuff about the religion, the Catholic religion, say for example, and they talk about the Bible, and people call it a great guidebook, and people swear by it, and other people go, oh yeah, well it's only a guidebook, and there's obviously talk about things like the Emperor Constantine. His wife was his mother was a sympathizer with the Christians at the time. And that's where I think you had the Christians thrown to the lions, because you weren't allowed to practice your religion. So you had this big meeting called the Council of Nicaea, where all these Christian religions came together and they all agreed on a kind of guidebook. And what we got from that is the Bible. And that's why a lot of people say there's a lot of inconsistencies in the Bible, because one group didn't know what the other group wanted, or wherever they put in, once they got what they wanted, somebody didn't go through and do an actual check to make sure that there's some continuity with the story. What's your take on that?
I really go into detail about this in my book, Eden. What happened, you have to go back and you have to understand that when Peter and Jesus were talking, first of all, in regard to the rock, and this is where there was a change and a problem with doctrine, because when the scripture says that he asked Peter how he knew he knew it because the Holy Spirit had actually given Peter the understanding of who Jesus was, that he was the Son of God. And the way the scripture says, upon this rock I shall build my church, unfortunately, that is how Constantine and Helena, his mother, actually began to use that to build the Catholic Church. What you have to understand is the disciples never believed like what the Catholic believe. They continued to be bishops. In other words, each succession, like from Peter on down to Matildes, they actually wore sackcloth, they traveled, they were not wealthy, they continued to do the same type of teaching of the Gospels that Jesus Christ had done in regard to what had happened, and tying it really back into the Old Testament. But what happened with Matildes, when he encountered Constantine was, and I try to show this, he really truly was not Christian. But he was a great emperor, and he saw that the countries that he had really infiltrated and had conquered, that he could not bring them together under a Roman Empire as he wanted them unless he was able to bring pagans and Christians together. It was never going to work. So he devised a way in such that he asked Matildes if he would come in and help him that he would give Matildes the opportunity to become not just a man walking around in sackcloth, but to be the head of a church in which he would build this huge place, which he did, the Vatican, and build him a place to bring worship together. Well, what happened in all this was that it had to be that Matildes had to also incorporate in the pagans' religion. So that's where you get into the problem with, if you look back at the statues that were once there in Rome, where the Vatican was built, they were statues like of Zeus and of Isis. They were the virgin cult. And what happened was they started calling the same statues that they were actually used for the old gods of pagan religions. They changed them and said, well, oh, this is Peter and this is John and this is now Mary. And this is not Isis and Horus. It's the Madonna and Child. And so what they did to allow people to come together in kind of a one world kind of order thought process, they were willing to accept, let's say, the pagan side of it and the religious side of it. And there's where you get things messed up. Like, for example, we celebrate that Jesus Christ was born on December the 25th, when that was not correct at all. He was not born on December 25th. That was a tria's birth date. That was a pagan situation. There was a real, they had their own process of what happened through history up until the time of the same time as what the Christians had as far as Jesus coming. So that was one reason I went back in my book Eden to take you from the Garden of Eden so that you understand that there's been two histories that have been written. And there's one that's quite out there and there's one that's kind of an underlying history. But those two histories were kind of brought together into pagans and Christians to form the Catholic Church. So you took gospel information and you mixed it with doctrines of men and some of the pagans. And we took, a person who was supposedly a bishop who has, been from from the apostles all the way down to this point in time, and we all of a sudden make him into something that he is not representing really Christ as Christ was represented really by the disciples. So if you look at that, you get really like, oh my gosh, how did it get so twisted around? But what happens if you look back in the Bible, you find that Jesus specifically told the Pharisees and Sadducees of the day that they were vipers. And that's because they were mixing Babylonian paganism in with true Mosaic law. Well, we see that the Catholic Church did the same thing. They took the Gospels and they mixed in the Babylonian things that Jesus actually stood against. And had Martin Luther not come out of that church and said, these people are trying to make people turn to the Catholic religion, thinking that that person is the vicar of Christ and that you have got to, beg Mary to be able to get to Jesus. And that was not correct, because in the Bible it specifically says that although Mary was blessed, God, Jesus himself said, she was no different. He didn't even acknowledge her as being above him in any form or fashion. He specifically told the people that only, that God was the only thing that was above him. Of course, he was the Son of God. And that you were never supposed to worship anything but through him to God. So the whole concept of the Mary situation and how it was set up goes back to the virgin cult of Isis and Horus, which actually goes back to Nimrod and Samaris, and then it goes on further back to Eve having had a relationship with the serpent and produced the lineage of Cain. It's all about that kind of setup. And if people don't go back and get the foundation of what happened in the very beginning, then you don't see how this mixture has happened. And that was one of the reasons that when I wrote my book, Eden, I called it The Knowledge of Good and Evil, because people do not realize that Satan plays a little good and he mixes in a little evil. And when you see that and when you find that, you know that that's not pure truth. And when Martin Luther came out and said, he broke away, he said, common people, the commoners of the world had the right to have the Gospels and the Gospels in their hands and to know the truth and not be infiltrated by the doctrines of man. And if you look at the cataclysms and all the stuff that's been done to manifest and put in the change of trying to put really the biblical gospel, the Mosaic law, before that, and try to indoctrinate you into the pagans side of things, which that is exactly what Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena did. I mean, they were absolutely trying to get their hands on all the stuff that were sacred religious objects. And that is one of the reasons that I was able to look at what they were building and what they were doing and what they were manifesting and keeping, that they were trying to make sure that their empire stayed together, and that was only the reason they were doing it, because Helena and he both had a lot of things that they did. When you research them, I mean, they were into some kind of things that were, messing with the spiritual realm. Now, God, the Bible does not say that the spiritual realm is not real. It is very real. And it doesn't tell you that if you do necromancy and you mess with the spirits that those things are not real, because it does tell you that they are real. But when you start doing that, you're bringing in an essence of evil, and you're mixing it with pureness, and that is a real, abomination in God's sight, because everything He made in the Garden of Eden, if you look back even before that, He made everything pure and true to its kind.
Okay,
there was no mixing.
Okay, well, does the answers develop into more questions? So there's going to be.
Well, that's right. It's all connected, and that's one thing with my research that I haven't tried to stay like in one area, because if you don't get the foundation to understand why all this stuff has come to pass, it makes no sense to understand what's going to happen in the future. I mean, if you don't lay your foundation correctly and understand why mixing is going on and why, Constantine and Helena were doing what they were doing. I mean, it's a selfish type of thing, and it doesn't lead to the foundations of what really was established in the very beginning. Okay. And if you can get that understanding, then it helps you grasp the game players and what they were up to. Okay.
Obviously, as I say, there's more questions that come from the answers that you have. Now, Steve's putting together a couple of questions from our listeners, which are going to be coming to you shortly. But okay, again, I'm going to kind of go down. You mentioned about the Eve thing. Now, you have two sides of the camp. You have your Adam and Eve story, which I believe it's a metaphor for something. And then you have your Darwinians who believe in the Darwinian theory of evolution. So who's right?
I proved that in my book too. Well, you have to look back at Genesis. And in Genesis the first, it specifically tells you these are the generations of men. And generations is very interesting because the first couple of lines in the Bible, it tells you that there was a creation and then it became void. In other words, something was destroyed and rebuilt back again. Then you can get back into the first part of Genesis where God is actually creating the animals after their kind, and He's doing what He's doing. But He never, in that aspect of the first part of the Bible, He never says that darkness is good. He says the light is good, but darkness He never mentions that it's good. The other thing is He creates only after the Bible says that these are the generations of the heavens and earth. So that tells you that when people go out and archaeologically find that something could be 100,000 years old and that doesn't meet up with so-called biblical scripture, yes, it meets up with biblical scripture because the Bible tells you that these are the generations. The word is generations. It doesn't say generation. It says generations. This is why it's important for people to pick up their Bibles and to really read each word individually and not try to take a foundation that they got in listening to someone or in Sunday school and try to understand all this. It's very important to look at each word.
Can I jump in there quickly while you mention about the archaeologists finding stuff? I have to mention the Nephilim in the Bible.
Yes, they were very real. The Bible says they were real. Genesis 6:4 specifically tells you that the sons of God came upon the daughters of men and that they produced creatures called giants. And if you look at what happened with Adam and Eve, let's go back and let's look at that. Before Adam and Eve were created, there was a male and female that was created in the image of God. That male and female was told to go out and replenish the earth. Replenish is a word that's very strange there, because if something had not been before, the word replenish would not be correct. So that tells you that sometime before even those male and female were created, that there was something that had already existed, and they were going to be replenishing, because that's the same thing he tells Noah and his family once he gets off the flood. Off the ark after the flood.
Oh. Dr. Joy, are you there? I think you might have lost communication with Dr. Joy there for a minute. Oh, okay, we got disconnected. Okay, we'll just try hook up again in a minute and see if we can get on. We just lost the call there, and it was getting interesting because there's more stuff that we're going to go into and talk about, especially with the Adam and Eve thing. But this is the trouble when you have telephone lines, and I suppose the same with Skype and the broadband. These things do happen.
Yeah, it's funny, but somebody mentioned in the chat there earlier that two people's their systems had crashed. And they're saying that the subject matter that we were discussing at the time was it was very out there, if you like. So I wonder, is this evil forces at work?
Well, while we're trying to get Dr. Joy back on, there is a book I would recommend the people go and buy and have read of. I'm not, as I say, I'm more of a spiritual guy. I don't really do the religion thing, but there's a book out there called Return of the Gods, and it was a book fictitiously written to say what would happen regarding religion. So the whole story behind it is that this coach trip go on a trip up the mountains somewhere, and basically the weather starts getting bad, so the coach trip go into this cave. It's probably about 30, 40 people, whatever, go into this cave, and they stay in there for about 3 days because the weather's so bad. And when they come out, they realise, you okay?
Are we talking to ourselves?
Why?
It's kind of looking like, from what I'm seeing here, that we've no internet access. I'm not sure if anyone is hearing us. Can you just maybe type something in the chat box? I'm getting indications here that we're offline. Not 100% sure if that is correct. Anyone hearing us out there? Type something in the chat box.
We're online.
Okay. We may have been offline. Dr. Joy Horting disappeared. It said down here on the bottom, no internet access.
Wow,
so
okay.
I think we were
TNS Player is playing tunes. We're gone. We're back up. I think.
Okay. I think
there's a glitch there.
Well, we do have Dr. Joye Jefferies Pugh back.
For any reason.
Sorry. See, Dr.
I don't know
Joy,
what happened there.
We're talking about a subject which might be a bit heated for some people, and I think the minions have been playing with the wires there. I think you went down, and then we went down, and now we're back up again. But sorry about that. That's never happened. But then again, as we said, one of the listeners who's on the chat facility said that his computer crashed as well, and somebody else was having problems trying to get in. So maybe we were talking on a subject that's quite sensitive for some people, Joy.
Not again.
Check the Skype again.
Not again.
Right, we try and get Joy again. I don't know why it keeps connecting. It looks like
It says here no internet access again. So it's looking like we are offline.
Yeah, streamer is connecting. Yeah, we are offline. Disconnected.
Oh, we're back. We're back.
We're back. Well, the links are saying error here.
Hello?
Joy, twice in a row. We're not 100% sure exactly what's going on, but our internet access has just gone down. Well, it went
back
down there
again
for the second time. We're back online now, obviously, because we're speaking with you. But yeah, we're having some technical difficulties here that we've never in the history experienced
Listen,
before.
I don't mean to laugh, but I have this problem all the time. That's what I'm saying. My research really puts it in people's face, and I don't think they really want this knowledge to be known.
Dr. Joy, you're the kiss of death to the internet.
I think you're right there. I think they're playing around with our cabling, because this generally doesn't happen. So, right, while we have the stream back up and we have the people in the chat back up there, yeah, that's very strange. I was just talking while we lost you there. we were talking about the Adam and Eve thing, and obviously, how true that is, and the history of that, and we were talking about the difference between, your belief in Adam and Eve and the Darwinian thing, and that's what you were touching base on. Do you want to finish with that?
Yes, what I was trying to say was that when you look at Adam and Eve was created from Adam's rib, and Adam's rib was absolutely the best place to get DNA. So that meant that their flesh was the same, and that was why God said for you to, to reproduce after your flesh, after your kind. What happened in Genesis 6:4, when the sons of God came upon the daughters of man, and they produced these giants, or what we know as Nephilim, that means that the DNA was not the same. So they were not producing the flesh after their kind. That was a major problem. In fact, that is what brought about the Great Flood. And now, archaeological finds have proven that there was a great flood that happened on this earth. And in fact, every known religious, spiritual group out there, a race of people, all have true flood stories. Now, they may have a different name for the person, but essentially it's the same type of thing, that there was a major flood, that these people went through it, and then they repopulated the earth. I find it very strange if that didn't happen, why all these people were able to come up with the same thing. Now, we know at the Tower of Babel that you had the problem with the languages being changed, so therefore you have different names for different people, but you can pretty well paste together some of the similarities. Although there is a parallel of history that has been written by what I call the serpent seed of Cain's lineage versus the true human seed of Adam and Eve. Because in the problem where Eve began to mess with the serpent, and then she became pregnant, then God specifically said that he was going to separate, there will always be enmity and hatred between the serpent seed and the true, pure human seed. And there's where you got an issue right there that goes right on up till today in fighting that kind of thing, because it's a royal serpent versus a commoner or a common, pure human. And that's a really, really serious situation, and it starts really from going back and looking at what happened in the Garden of Eden and understanding that Adam and Eve could never have produced a giant. Their DNA would have never allowed it. You have to have a mutation of something to allow a different flesh. Again, that was a part of mixing that was against what God had created in the very beginning. And when you look at what science has delivered to us, is that the human has 223 genes that does not have an evolutionary track. In other words, you can't go back and say we came from an ape, because they don't have that. You can't make that up. So I prove that, we were created just as the Bible says we were created. We do not have that track back. Now, going back and talking about were there other things besides humans upon this earth, well, we have documentary proof of that, because we have what was called a Homo sapien, of which we are. We also know there was something called a Homo erectus. I believe that the first male and female that's created there in the first part of Genesis, in the first chapters, when it says that there was an image made of a male and female and they were told to go out and replenish, they were absolutely in a human shape and form, and they actually mingled in, because there is where Cain, when he was put out away from Adam and Eve and went out to build his city, he went out and was a part of that. Looking at the flesh of DNA, this DNA would have matched. In other words, he could have had sexual relationships and produced, even though they were not as he was, or not as Adam and Eve were, because Adam and Eve were actually given a breath of life, separating them from the true male and female that was just out in the field along with the other beast. And if you look back at the Jewish Talmud, you can find that is where there's a beast without a soul. In other words, there is flesh that does not have a soul in it. It's a difference from Adam and Eve and their lineage that did have a soul, did have a breath of life. And understanding the commonality between ones that don't have a soul and ones that do have a soul, and why Cain was able to go out and manifest and do, and how the archaeological record and scientific, record has shown us that the Homo erectus eventually became extinct, because the Homo sapien population is what, overtook everything. And then, before the flood, we know that those giants were a part of the mix, meaning that they were not pure human as well. And the fact is, you can see that even the Bible talks about after the flood, there was this remnant of giants and how huge they were and how they had strange traits. Like, for example, they had 6 toes on a foot, 6 fingers on a hand, extremely tall. They were typically people who they were bloody, they loved blood, and they were violent behaviors that they exhibited, much like really Cain was, because he had the same animalistic type capability to not have followed what God has essentially set up with Adam and Eve, and their children should have been that way. He actually brought to the picture a type of trait that was not known to the traits of Adam and Eve as children on down through their lineages up until the flood, as it was a trait of the serpent or the trait of Satan. So there's a lot of genetics, a lot of science that's really going on. And when I sat down to do Eden, I tried to bring that into the mix so you get a grasp of that. And I'm going to even take it much more detailed in my next books, because so many people have overlooked that. We all were taught, the story of Adam and Eve, and that there was a tree and there was a snake in it and an apple, and you just didn't get the basis of what genetically was happening, how the generations are all there, how it explains that, why the first male and female were created, meaning probably the Homo erectus population, how they went extinct, how, Cain was able to find people to marry and do whatever on the outside of Eden. There was a reason the Garden of Eden was set up, because Adam and Eve had a soul. They were not held to the same standards as the rest of the beast or the animals. And the reason you can say that is that before, right after they are created, God marries them. And that was one thing that was red flag to me, because I never paid attention to the fact that there was an institution of marriage. But yet the institution of marriage holds true as far as the soul is concerned, all the way through the end of time. We have a soul that is accountable to God. And as a part of that, it was mandated by God that you would produce after your kind, and only after your kind, and that you would remain pure and true to your husband or wife or whatever, to be able to produce that seed that would continue like that. And now that we're understanding DNA a little bit more, and I'll be bringing that up in my new work, is that once you really take DNA and you have it separated from the person, it still has a connection to the body, even though it's at a distance. It reacts the way that you're reacting, but then if you really irradiate it and you use like a radiation against it, when it deteriorates, then there is a wave pattern that's formed, and that energy exists. And I explained this in my book in Eden about how the law of thermodynamics says that anything that's ever created with energy within it, as we are electromagnetic, it never ceases to exist. So it's not lights out. When people think, oh, well, I don't have to believe in a God, or I don't have to believe in Jesus, or I don't have to really live my life according to what Scripture has told me to live it, you can never say that you're going to just not be when you kill over. You will be. There's no way that you won't be, because science tells us you will still be. And now that we're getting more in tune to being able to look at what is DNA and how does it manifest itself and what is it connected to, then you start seeing all this energy and how it's all related, and how, the sun produces the solar waves and it produces an electromagnetic field, and those waves have direct influence upon everything that's living upon the earth. I mean, it is a whole lot going on that on the surface we haven't really scratched the understanding, but we're starting to. And I'm trying to bring it to the table and show how science and religion are very much connected. And the Bible is telling us, but we've been so, I guess, blind to understanding that we've just kind of read it and took for granted a lot of things because we didn't have maybe the science to help us see a little bit deeper. And the fact that even looking at what would have happened if, let's say, if we had really understood like sound, when it says God spoke and the kind of his word is what manifested everything, I take it a step further and say that you can look at an MRI. An MRI produces sound, and what does it do? It produces an image of your body. So sound has the capability of producing things, and everything around us is singing. Everything has its own harmonic resonance. Everything, from the planets to everything around us. And once you get a grip on all this, you start seeing, well, this could be how a creator could have brought to pass what it says in the Bible was brought to pass. And
okay.
and it's all related, and my research brings it all together so you can see the relationship.
Okay, well, what we'll do is obviously get your details at the end of the show for your books and stuff, because it sounds very interesting. What I want to do now, Joy, is, because obviously we have about 30 minutes or so left, 25, 30 minutes left. But what I want to do is I want to pass over to Steve, because Steve has a few questions now from our listeners. So, Steve, take it away.
Yeah, the first question, Joy, on the list is, one of our listeners was wondering, are you familiar with the work of Michael Tessarian and his work on the Caesarian?
On the what now?
I knew you were going to ask me to repeat that. I'm having trouble with this word. Caesarian. Michael Tessarian's work on Caesarian.
I'd have to know a little bit more about what he said. I'm familiar with him, but I'm not understanding what your Caesarian. That's not ringing a bell to me.
Okay, maybe so. Our listener can just maybe post up a little bit more on that question, because I'm not kind of getting the link myself. I'll move on.
I may be calling it something totally different than what he's got a terminology about it. That's my concern.
Okay, well, I'll move on to the second question. Second question is from Lord Vapor, one of our regulars here, and he's wondering, are you aware of the painting of Sybil in the Vatican, which portrays her with 5 fingers and a hidden thumb?
You know, there's a lot of strange pictures out there, and I will agree that the more we start looking at these kinds of things, no different than, you know, the picture of the royal holding the serpent that was covered up with a nice bouquet of flowers, and until the painting started really deteriorating, then you didn't realize that there was, she was actually holding a serpent. People were like, oh my gosh, why would she be holding a serpent? Well, the reason she was holding a serpent because it's the serpent lineage. And the people who had those paintings, they had them in their homes, and they were not ever, you know, commoners were never allowed in there to be able to see a lot of this stuff. And they didn't understand. And then when it was put out in public and seen more often, then they covered those things up, because they don't want the commoner to know that there is, in fact, a royal lineage that does exist all the way from the Garden of Eden. And they have typically been the royal thoroughbreds who have maintained their DNA after the flood. And I go in detail about this, about Ham's lineage, and how they remanifested, reconstituted those dominant serpent genes to manifest and bring about a legacy and a lineage that still exists today that rules us. And the commoners, unfortunately, have been kept so at bay as to these things, they're not aware of it. But like I said earlier, when the Bible talks about the remnant of the giants, it specifically talks about these DNA traits where you've got people who do not have certain fingers, certain toes, their height, their strange long necks, their elongated skulls. You can look at the pharaohs and see the huge elongated skulls that are very serpentine. These are serpentine traits, and they are mixed into many times into the general population if for some reason those serpent thoroughbreds ever had a sexual relationship with just pure humans, and those pure humans and then turn around and had sexual relationships with humans, and then it infiltrated, some of the DNA of the pure human. And we know that kind of happened back in the days when God was trying his best to keep his Hebrew children from not becoming infiltrated with these types of beings. Specifically, he told them to stay away. And he actually told his people that when they went into these camps to kill every man, woman, child, and beast, because they were mixed. He did, people say, oh my gosh, he was a terrible God. Well, no, his intent in the flood was to get rid of the problem. After the flood, it was to get rid of the problem, and then his purebred, that he had established as far as pure humans, he was trying to keep them from infiltrating and getting those DNA traits within the system of the pure human. And the whole intent, again, had there not remained a pureness until Jesus Christ could come and be sacrificed upon the cross, then no person would be saved. No human, no pure human would be able to call upon anything and be saved at that point in time. So, Satan was after to to really mess up the pure lineage from which Jesus came from, because if he had had any blemish, then he would have been like the high priest. If he took in a lamb and the lamb was blemished, then the Ark of the Covenant would not react to it because it was not pure. I mean, God's voice would not come through it. There was no manifestation between the two. The same thing would happen had Jesus gone to the cross. If he could not have gone in a pure state without sin and without, with something within the body that would have been keeping his blood from being able to be the cleanser of humanity, if you can say so,
then
it would have been a problem.
Just jump in there. So what you're saying technically, well, there's two questions there with that before we go on to the next question. One, that the Holy Grail could be the bloodline and this pure bloodline, and number two, these elites that want to keep this bloodline pure this is why they have a eugenics program to kill the majority of the population of the planet today.
Well, see, the pure holy bloodline, like the Merovingian bloodline, that's a hard word for me to say, they believe it came from Jesus and Mary Magdalene's union and that they had children. Well, that's a myth and not true. They don't really tell the truth that their bloodline has been a mixture all the way from the lineage of Cain through the flood, and it has manifested itself, and they have kept themselves in a royal thoroughbred position. The only way to rule any kingdoms of earth is to be connected to that bloodline. And that is why when Jesus walked the earth, that Satan was able to take him up and say, if you bow down to me, big boy, I'm going to give you the kingdoms of the earth. Now here is Satan telling the Son of God that. And we know that when Jesus went before Pilate, he specifically said, my kingdoms are not of this world. So you can figure that everybody that's ruling has got a connection to one another. And there's been plenty of researchers that have been able to connect the dots of lineage between the royals and people who rule the kingdoms of this world. They're all one big family. And that's scary because then the commoners who are under all these people, whether it be in a democratic situation or in a dictatorship or a rulership, you're all answering to a lineage that has existed on this earth that is a part of Satan, because you will not find anybody ruling something like that who does not have a bloodline connection to those royal serpents. That's scary, because if you stop and think who makes the laws, who controls the wars, who does whatever, then you understand why Jesus said his kingdoms were not of this world. So those people who are ruling have to be a part of Satan, or they cannot rule, because Satan was given the right to rule the kingdoms of this earth, simply because it is in a fallen world. We are not in the Garden of Eden anymore. We are literally existing in a fallen world that is ruled by the so-called thoroughbreds who say they have the divine right to rule. Now, their work has been put forth to try to make it look like that Jesus gave them the divine right to rule. That's where all your pedigrees have kind of come from, and they've been kind of twisted, and this one's been added, and that one's been taken out. And when you do the histories on all this kind of stuff, you start seeing that they have tried to make sure that everybody thinks, let's say, try to make sure the commoners think they have the right to rule, that God gave them the right to rule. That's not correct. Satan rules the kingdoms. If you try to put a real, true, pure human in office somewhere, you're going to have a real problem doing it.
Well, I think we can agree with you on that one, because anybody who seems to want to go in and make a change for the better is either ousted, or there's some blackmail involved, or there's an accident, he or she does an accident, and they're killed and taken out because they're not kowtowing to the elites. Steve, you have another question for Joy?
Yeah, I have two more questions. Well, I've a personal comment and a question from Michael from TNS. My own personal comment is based on what you were saying about the serpents and serpentine. It struck a chord in my mind, where I'm not sure if you're familiar with the work of David Icke, but David Icke has been saying for years that about the reptilians and the reptilian bloodline, and he gets kind of hauled over the coals, and people think he's full of excrement. for saying such ridiculous mumbo jumbo. But I mean, when from what you're saying there, and it makes perfect sense when you kind of drill down into it, it does the dots do seem to join, and it's kind of seems now that what David Icke is saying does kind of there is a lot of truth in it.
Yeah, I mean, I've read some of David's work, and people have asked me about, his work. The thing that concerns me about David's work is the fact that he has not really gotten the whole concept, or he would be a Christian. I don't think he professes to be a Christian, so therefore I think that he hasn't got to the point that I have in my research that would literally prove it. You better be getting on the right road, because those serpents do exist. And that capability between them is like a universal consciousness. And my work, goes into proving that it's much like the bees or the ants. They're mound builders, no different than the Tower of Babel. They're connected, and when they went out and were able to build these huge, what I call megalithic stone structures all over this planet, based on the dragon ley lines that exist in the magnetic grid, they are connected universally through this consciousness, no different than you have worker bees that are connected to the queen bee, because the queen bee can be anywhere. She don't have to be near them, and they will continue to work. But if she dies, they become erratic, and everything falls apart. And when you see how this has been manifested across the world, and people say, well, how is it that, we have the pyramids in Egypt, but yet we have these great, huge structures similar down, in South America, where, the Yucatan, how do these people have the same concept? Well, when you understand bees and you understand universal concept and you understand the connection they had to Satan and to harmonic geometry, at a distance, it doesn't matter where you take, again, I can take the DNA, we can prove it now, you take it out at a distance and it has a harmonic resonance to it that however you react to it, it reacts to itself. If you're connected to that bee system and you're more animalistic, and you're more serpentine, you have in a lizard a third workable eye. And everybody calls the third eye the pineal gland. That's why I talk about in my research how important the pineal gland is because it's an antenna. It receives and it transmits. No different than this bee situation with the queen bee. And that could take a whole show just to try to talk about, so I won't go into great detail about it. But it does show you that there is a lineage upon this earth that has a workable third eye, and that they are able to use this universal consciousness to connect to themselves and do great things in different places and head stuff up and do whatever, that humans don't really have that capability. But they are trying to make our pineal glands get like that so that they can control us at the end of days, because at that point they can use mass hallucination. And in my work, I showed that's the reason the 144,000 at the end of days are sealed in their forehead to go through the end of days, because if they were not sealed in that gland, they would not survive it.
Well, it's quite interesting what you say there about the pineal gland, because we have seen, or we've heard people, and we've also spoken with people who are saying that the likes of, say, here in Ireland and in America as well, the fluoridation water, or the fluoridation it's in all the water, say here and in the States and various other countries, that one of the side effects of the fluoride is that it calcifies the pineal gland. So therefore, I'm guessing that once that happens, then it would no longer act as this antenna.
What can happen? It can do two things. You can make something more crystallized. And the more crystallized it is, the more open you are to being able to be controlled. Also, you can put it such in a way that God cannot come through. And I kind of show how the book of Daniel, when it talks about that, Daniel was trying to, he prayed to God and he was waiting for an answer, and it says specifically that the answer, the angel, was actually delayed from coming back to Daniel something like 20-something days. So it shows you through harmonic resonance that I think that because Satan was created as a cherub, and he was created to have a covering of the earth. In other words, he had the electromagnetic capability. He had the ability of sound. And if you take, let's say, two sounds are going at the same time, or AM and FM radio are on different waves, if you can connect one to, let's just say God is the AM station and Satan is the FM station, if you can force the pineal gland to only pick up the FM station and you block the capability for being able to pick up the AM station, then you've got them locked into this universal conscious like I'm talking about, which you can biologically control an individual by. I mean, that was used back in the 60s with Delgado's work, in which they were beaming these electromagnetic beam particles, things at people, even in Russia, against the American embassy and causing them to get cancer. But you can absolutely control or do things to a body at a distance. So now that we understand this electromagnetic capability, if you beam at a person, and they can't feel it, you can't see the wave coming at you, but you will react. In other words, your heart rate will speed up, you'll become nervous, you'll become either lethargic or fatigued. In other words, you can take over somebody without them ever having to fire a shot. You can literally shut them down biologically, kind of like remote control. And as we understand the body more, then the remote control capability becomes greater.
That's right. It's about the targeted individual, what you're talking about, something that myself and Steve have dealt with and we're dealing with at the moment. We are in contact with people who've been targeted, and technology is being used to control them and manipulate them.
And you can, because biologically, you cannot fight something controlling your autonomic nervous system from outside the body. It's like if you're allergic to caffeine, and you drink caffeine, you're going to get a stimulating effect, even though you try to say, well, slow down, don't let my heart beat fast, take a deep breath. As long as that is influencing you, as long as that drug's in your body, you can't do anything about it. You're going to biologically react to it. That's the same way as these particle beams. If they're being used against you, you literally can't fight it. You cannot get away from it. It literally controls you.
Okay, we have a question there from a chap on the TNS chat facility there. Do you want to read that one out, Steve?
Yes, this is Dr. Joy. A question from Alan, and Alan is wondering, are you saying that Jesus/God was a racist and a supremacist? Supremacist.
No. In fact, if you're a commoner, you better be glad he came like he did, because if he didn't, we would never have an opportunity to be saved. What I'm saying is, in the Garden of Eden, when God made Adam, and he blew in him the breath of life. He made him a living soul out of flesh for that soul to reside in. That's why he took that same flesh and DNA and produced Eve, so that we would all be pure humans and not have reptilian traits in us that would keep us from having a soul, and therefore when you die you would become a demonic entity to walk this earth. And the demons walk this earth because when Christ was here, that's one of the first things he did. He talked to them, he brought them out of people, he run them into the swine, they go into animals and all kinds of stuff. They are very real. They exist in the spiritual realm, they exist in the physical realm with us. They are here all the time and they watch us. And some people don't like to think about that, but they do.
And they'll
always want to say, well, I want to know about a ghost. And I'm like, let me tell you about a ghost. Let me tell you about a demon. And when you start showing them and explaining to them, and they start seeing these things manifest, then it's not funny anymore. It's kind of like, I want to see the ghost, but then when you show me, I'm scared.
Yeah.
They didn't want to see the ghost to begin with.
Well, there are names for these.
My work shows you that. So, no, he was not racist. He made the races. He made humanity as it is. He made the birds. He made the different birds. He made black birds, red birds, purple birds. He did all kinds of pretty colors on birds. So he has no problem with the races. This is not about a race, and this is not about anything other than two lineages that are here. One is of the serpent, and one is of true human flesh. And then people go, oh, well, gosh, I've got a sixth toe. And I had a friend that had a sixth toe, and she just was worried about why she had, 6 toes, was something wrong with her. Because the manifestation happened with the traits being mingled, that does not make you a serpent. Let me just say, if you're a serpent, you won't have the question. All serpents know who they are.
Okay.
So right, says, oh, but am I a commoner? Am I really of serpent lineage? If you got that question in your mind, you're a commoner. All serpents know who they are. They never have that question.
Okay, so and I suppose all the negative entities you're talking about, they come in all different names depending on where you're from or what religion you support. You might call them the archons, you might call them the jinns, you might call them negative energies, you might call them earth-based spirits who haven't gone to the light. I mean, there's numerous names for the same thing, but we're dealing with energy. And we're dealing with these, and this is why they say also that when you take the likes of alcohol and drugs, it lowers down your vibration, opening up a channel for negative entities to get in.
That's right. That's exactly what happens. You are opening yourself up for the spiritual realm that God says in the Bible exists through necromancy, through mediumship. All that is real. I mean, when the witch of Endor, when Saul went and to ask her to conjure up Samuel, she did. The Bible doesn't say she didn't do it. She did it. The thing about it is, it's like if you do that and you get involved in that, then you are in a situation, it's a physical flesh and blood, you can't fight it. And that's why you've got so many people now. I mean, the Catholic Church has said they've got to get more people. There's so many, need for exorcisms right now because so many people got so many demons. And I'm going to tell you, if you ever see a demon, it'll change your mind forever. It's kind of like people who don't believe in UFOs, and they're always, Joy, that can't be a UFO. Until they see one, and then I'm the first person they call.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Joy. I have experience with energies, and a couple of other things which I won't go into. So I can kind of vouch on the negative energy side, because even to the level of people around you, we call them energy vampires, who suck your energy. People who you'll sit in their company for like 10 or 15 minutes, and when you're finished with them, you think, man, my energy's just been zapped. I don't know why. And also the thing that we say over here in Ireland, and we've been saying for years, is, God, that person gives me a bad vibe. And they're picking up on their energy, the bad vibration. But Steve, do you have any more questions there, do you?
Yes, I do indeed. I have a comment, Dr. Joy, that came in earlier from Bluebell. Bluebell, and this is kind of a two-part. It ties in with the question from Michael from TNS. Bluebell says that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute, and was there not a gospel found that she perhaps wrote? And then Michael is wondering, how do you know which books belong in the Bible?
Listen, I go into long detail. I discussed that in Eden too. Mary Magdalene, you're right. She's correct. She's totally correct. Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. There is nowhere in the Bible that it identifies her as the woman who was found as a prostitute, in which Jesus, drew the line in the sand and told the guys are going to be stoning her, go ahead and throw that stone if you're without sin, and all of them put the stone down and walked away. That woman was not Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene did have demons, and he did cast the demons from her. And, once a person has demons and those demons are removed, they will follow Christ, because they, of all people, know that those things are real. It's like I said, if a person sees a demon, they don't have to worry about believing in Christ. I've always said that if you could just show somebody hell that's in the middle of the earth, you could dig down far enough and just show it to them, they all be running to the churches, today.
Exactly. Right.
They would know that they don't want to go there. So it's one of those kinds of things that, no, Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute, and she was not and that she did have the demons, and that she very well knew that they were true and they were real. And that's why she would have done anything for him. And it's like I mentioned earlier, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is a Gnostic version that was found where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, and that came from the quantum community. And I show how this came about because the Essenes were a part of the Sadducees and Pharisees groups. They were secret society orders, of which Judas Iscariot, that actually did Jesus in for the 30 pieces of silver. He was a part of the assassin group. Jesus was aware of that. He knew the people who were around him who were not of his makeup. And what happens is you get what I call parallel histories. For example, there's a flood story of Noah from the Bible. There's also a Sumerian flood story called Gilgamesh that changes the name, and it talks about a ship that was actually a ship that sank at the very bottom of Ariat that was carrying seeds, much like the seed vault we've got in the Antarctic right now that the serpents have built, trying to think they're going to make it through these end of days. But anyway, they didn't make it through the flood. All happened was just what was left over at the base of Ariat. But what happens is, if you don't understand that there are gospels that have been written by the serpent seed to make their lineage at the end of days be able to produce a Messiah to fool the world, if you're not aware of that, then when you get caught up reading that and it kind of contradicts the Bible, then you're going, okay, well, now who's right? Well, it's no different than you get people who like Fox News Network versus NBC here in America. You know, they tell it one way and Fox tells another. Well, who's telling the truth? Well, they're talking about the same story, but they're playing it to the people that follow them. And that's exactly what happens when you talk about the Gospels of Philip and the Gospels of Mary Magdalene. Those are the reason they're not in the Bible. They're not books about the true, pure, human creatures that God created. It's not the history of commoners. Those kinds of things deal with the histories of the serpent seed.
Okay, Joy, we have literally 5 minutes left. So we're going to quick fire the questions at you, and if you can answer them in a sentence, that would be great, yeah?
Okay.
Steve.
Okay. Right, a question here from Brendan. And Brendan is wondering, Joy, if you're familiar with the book by Joseph Atwell called Caesar's Messiah, the Roman Conspiracy to Invent Jesus.
No, I'm not. I've not heard of that.
Okay. Anything else there?
Yeah. Is Joy aware that they have discovered the gravesite of Gilgamesh in Babylon, Iraq, and this is the real reason for invasion? That's a question from
I would say that the reason we went over there, according to the information that I got, was to remove some very hidden things just like that, and to secure them, because they're going to need that for the serpent seed to put their Messiah in power.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful. You got to know that when this stuff starts coming out, no different than when they open up the vault under the Sphinx that's there, and may have been some of the stuff removed during all these revolts that are going on, is to get that stuff out of there, because when the Antichrist comes to power, he's going to use that information to try to prove the so-called new Jesus, the new Messiah for the new age. And it's going to be serpent documentation.
Okay, we're going to
have to be aware of that.
Yeah. Okay, another quick question, just for myself, because we're kind of rounding it up, and again, quick fire. What's your definition, if you can condense it very small, of the rapture?
It is a catching away, and it is a part of what the Jewish were taught back to even that Jesus was a Jew, and the Feast of Trumpets, and the thief in the night. All those things are connected, and yes, there will be a catching away. People say, well, the word rapture doesn't appear in the Bible. That was a terminology that was used for the catching away. But the catching away happens right before there's silence in heaven in Revelation, in which the line in the sand is drawn, the 144,000 are sealed, and we head into God's great wrath, which will end in the Battle of Armageddon and then the return of Jesus Christ at the second coming, which is called the Day of the Lord.
Who's this 144,000?
The 144,000 are 12,000 of the 12 tribes of Israelites that are still pure virgins. And when I say pure virgins, we're talking about pure human with no manifestation of serpent genetics in their blood.
So that doesn't include us then?
It doesn't, probably unless you're a part of that, it doesn't apply to us, because what happens to us is that we are considered the bride of Christ as Christians. Anybody who's grafted in, whether Christians, Jews, whatever you are, if you believe in Christ, when he comes as a thief in the night, a part of that. And the catching away is when you go. That's why the 144,000 of the pure remnant, after the fact, are sealed, because they will come to the understanding that Jesus is who he said he was. And they'll be able to see that. Then there'll be the two witnesses that will walk on the earth to prove that again and live at the end of days. And then when the second coming comes, they'll be prepared for the day of the Lord. But they have to be sealed. If they were not sealed, like we mentioned earlier, the pineal gland would allow them to be confused or not be able to understand that knowledge.
Okay, well, just so I understand where you come from, would be the last question now. But so what you're saying is, before the rapture or whatever's going to happen to the earth, we will be taken away, or we will ascend or something?
Yes, in other words, the catching away is like a thief in the night, where you've got one person here, and then the other person's gone. There'll be a manifestation of people just vanishing, totally vanishing. The problem is if you're left here and you're not sealed, then you won't really understand it, and you may not even notice it, because, like I'm saying, the pineal gland, like we mentioned earlier, can be controlled at a distance. And this massive capability is why that 144,000 is sealed, because it says in the Scripture, if the days are not cut short for the people to be saved, then no flesh can survive it.
Okay, well, listen, we've reached that time. It's fantastic, and I'm sure we could go on for another 2 hours. So, Dr. Joye, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'm going to pass you over to Steve, and Steve will get all your details and websites and stuff like that. But thanks again for coming on, Steve.
Oh, I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it as well, and to be completely and totally honest, a lot of it has gone way over my head. I think my pineal gland, I'll have to take it out, give it a wash and blow dry, and put it back in, because it's obviously clogged up. I know it has been very interesting. There's a lot of chatting going on our chat box here as well. Of say a lot of our listeners will be more clued into some of this stuff than obviously I am, and on their behalf, I'll thank you for sharing it with us. Maybe, as Alan often says, when we have a very good interview, and we there's so many more avenues we could have went down, that maybe at some point in the future, I think there could be a part 2. Hopefully.
Yeah,
listen, I would love to do that. My research is just so broad-faceted. It's hard to really talk about something that took 7 years to put together in an hour and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Joy, can you give us some details on how people can find out more about your work? I know you have your books. Maybe you could mention the books again, and if you have a website as well, that'd be great.
Yes, the website is www.drjoye. That's Dr. Joy with an E.com. And if you go on my website there, you can click on the books and videos. You can click on my music. There's a lot of different things there, ongoing research that I'm doing. And if you'll click on where the books are, it will take you down to some links, and you can just click on the links. But like Amazon in the UK, all those places, you can, over there where you are, you can order through all of that overseas, or either you can click on some of the links like ArmageddonBooks.com. They ship internationally. So there's a lot of links that if you're interested in you're not in America, that you can click on and still get my work, Even the Knowledge of Good and Evil.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, Joy, just stay with us there for a minute. We're just going to go to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMIreland.com, CNSradio.me.com, and ICRadioNetwork.com.
And we're back. Richard, the Ra band, Richard Andrew Hewson. Someone said in the chat box that's going back a bit. It is, and as I said, I actually have that on vinyl album in my collection.
Now, that was a very interesting interview with Dr. Joye, even with the freaky stuff in the middle where we are losing internet connection. But, see, this is a thing with religion and politics, and I think we can all relate to this. You could have 10 people sitting around the table talking, and they'll all disagree with each other because they'll have their own viewpoint and their own belief system and their own research in what they've done. And that's why, to be honest with you, I can understand why people say religion and politics don't go down that road, because you're going to get people disagreeing with each other. So what is the truth? Well, they always say there's not one truth, there's 3. There's your truth, my truth, and the real truth. So, we could have went on for another 2 hours, and I know just people have their opinion on the chat facility, and they disagree with one thing, and then somebody else would disagree with them, and this is why it's it's mind-numbing to a certain extent, because of the subject matter. What is real? What is the truth? And what is fake? What are we being fed? Like the whole thing about the archaeology and finding things and hiding it if it doesn't fit into the actual dogma of the Catholic religion or religions in general. I can relate to that. That makes sense. Control the people. Don't be telling them. If they mentioned the Nephilim in the book of Genesis, I believe. And one of the things I didn't get to speak to Dr. Joye, and Stuart Lowe was on our show, and he said that man was made in the image of us. And it wasn't me, it was plural as in us. But here's a little teaser for you, right? Here's a little bit of end of show fun that you can have, okay? So what you can say is, right, if you have a room full of naked people, right, and Adam and Eve were in the room, how would you know who was Adam and Eve? Now, for you guys, for the Christians and, you know, the people who are big into the religion, you should know this answer straight away. And I'm not joking. This is not, I'm not, like, it's not,
I know.
there's no catch.
Are they wearing name tags?
No, and they're not wearing fig leaves either. So you have a couple of minutes. I'll give you 3 minutes to think about that answer. So if Adam and Eve were in a room full of naked people, how would you know which ones were Adam and Eve?
Obviously,
Okay.
Adam and Eve are naked as well among the people.
Yeah,
right?
everybody's
Right.
naked, yeah.
And the answer is not by going in and shouting, Adam and Eve, quick, God wants you outside. No.
No, definitely not.
Or,
Definitely not.
No, who wants an apple?
Okay, I can see I'm keeping you in suspenders. So do you want me to tell you?
No, I know the answer.
Did I tell you the answer?
About 2 years ago.
Oh, did I? Okay, so you know the answer. Okay, does anybody know the answer on the chat facility? I don't think we have any answers there.
Is there a prize, is there?
No, there's no prize. Well, if we had bumper stickers, there would be, but we don't have a prize.
No, wait a minute. Someone
They both have apples.
Someone on
I think
TNS
so.
has put up a good one there. Adam and Eve.
Oh, Bluebell's pretty. Well,
Even
not
Adam and
pretty
Eve.
close.
Now, you see, there's one on TNS. I'm not going to read it out, but it's on TNS there. Before it goes off the screen, that one there.
Well,
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
No, see, Laurie says on TNS, right, even Adam and Eve had belly buttons, but the whole thing is, if Adam and Eve was created by God or in the image of God, then they wouldn't have belly buttons because, as you know, a belly button comes from when a baby is born. I'm not going into details or graphic details, right? But, so, you know, if they were created by the image of God, then they wouldn't have belly buttons. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you have a room full of naked people. Adam and Eve would be the ones without belly buttons, right? So that's you know, a good question to ask somebody who's into religion in a big way. A little bit of a teaser there. But as I say, with the subject matter at hand, you know, there's always going to be arguments. There's always going to be people disagreeing with this, you know. So my suggestion is don't talk about religion and politics because you only get into arguments. But we thought we'd get Dr. Joy on because I know she has a lot of information. And she's going to send us a copy of her book, the Eden book, which we'll have a read of. And we get her back on, we'd be interested to have a read and see what she's exposing. Because she's obviously mixing religion with science, which is quite interesting.
That's an interesting one there from Howie. He said if they were, the Adam and Eve thing, if they were grown in an artificial womb, they may have a navel.
Yeah, but we don't really know because we weren't there, see?
But then again, if they were grown in an artificial womb, the vision, you know, the vision in the Matrix when Neo wakes up,
yeah,
that kind of looked to me like an artificial womb.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. Now, there is something I want you to talk about, Steve, quickly before we shut down for tomorrow night. Or to next week. The guest next week, by the way, very quickly, is Andrew Pisaggio. I'll get that name right. But Andrew was supposed to come on a couple of weeks ago, but he couldn't because he had a lecture to do. So we postponed it till next week. So fingers crossed he'll be on next week. And he's going to be talking about his experience working for the black government on time travel and trips to Mars and everything else. Going to be very interesting. But Steve, I quickly want you to talk about the fact that you met a guy who was told by the council that he cannot have chickens.
Yes. Oh, okay. Yeah, one of my neighbours. This is a conversation I had with Alan during the week. This was a conversation also that I had with a neighbour of mine about maybe 2.5 years ago. It's an elderly gentleman, and he was just kind of talking to me about what you could kind of grow in your garden. He's very green fingered or green thumbed, I think is the saying. But he was just having a chat with me, and he said, you know, what you can do, a small section of your garden, you can grow this and you can grow that. And he was telling me what, you know, the soil we had in the area, because I'm reasonably new to the area. He was telling me about the soil and what will grow, what will thrive, and, you know, what you'd be wasting your time planting. And he also told me that he had a friend. This chap himself, Frank is his name. He keeps chickens. Well, he has a couple of chickens, or a couple of chooks in his backyard, and he said he has a friend who he knows in the council, and a good friend of his, and they were having tea one day. The guy had just called up to pay Frank a visit, and they were having a cup of tea, And the guy just happened to say, Frank, is that a chicken out the back? And Frank says, yeah. He says, I like to have my own eggs, so I have a couple of chickens. And the guy said to him, well, he said, I won't, but I could report you because you're not allowed to have chickens. That's one of the mind that microphone there. That's just Alan kicking the microphone.
Sorry.
Yeah, kick a mic when he's down. So he said, you're not allowed to have chickens. Now this guy, he's not actually in a housing estate. He's kind of outside on like a main road in a little small, kind of a cottage. It's kind of a small little setup. But yeah, see, the council told him, well, this guy, that no, you're not allowed to have a chicken or chickens in your garden. That's it.
No, that's it. That's ridiculous.
That's all you wanted me to say?
I'm just reading a question here. The whole mantra about Andy says, Walton said about religion. The mantra, Lord Vapor says, the mantra that you don't talk about religion and politics is actually a mind-numbing control mantra. No, that's actually my choice because I get my head wrecked with politics and religion, so I don't. So
you don't talk to the politicians about religion and you don't talk to the priest about politics?
No, we don't. Right, okay, so that's
you have to register your chickens.
Yeah.
Can you count them before they're hatched?
Oh my God, have the registered chickens. Okay, so listen, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Sorry about the little glitch at the we don't know what happened there during the show with the internet going up and down. Very strange. Must be the gremlins or the archons or the gins or something, or on the gin.
Gin? Well, give me a small one there, will you? Give me a large one, actually.
Gin. Okay, so take it easy. Have a safe week. If there's any news, keep us posted. As usual, send in your links and let us know if there's anything happening. And as I say, next week we have Andrew Pasadio coming on, which will be quite interesting. But for myself, I don't think there's anything else you want to add, Steve?
I'll just add. I've just asked for anyone who wants to continue on. If they're, you're enjoying your evening sitting by the radio, by the wireless. Although it's not really wireless, you can stay with TNS. Vin is up next at 9 p.m. I just checked with Vin to see who he had on, and he's just himself on at the moment. But it's always good. Vin always he always gives a good show. And
sorry for the people the questions that we didn't get over. Time just runs away with us, and it's very hard to get everything in. But Joy will be on again, so make sure you're in for that next time.
One last thing. I seen a video on the internet during the week. Don't know if anyone has seen it. Just when Joy was talking about your pineal gland, some people call it your third eye. But there's a video on the internet going around of a dog. It's a fully grown dog. He had his eyes removed when he was a pup, and his favourite game is catch or fetch or whatever it is. He can navigate his way around. He doesn't bump into anything. There's a video going around the internet. And this dog, no eyes, Alan, and he's able to just run along after a ball. He go under fences, around obstacles. The ball actually went under the car, and he stopped because obviously the car was there, and he just didn't. He didn't hit the car, but
amazing.
Obviously, he's using other senses. But just thought I'd mention it. I thought it was very good.
Okay, good night for myself, Alan James.
And good night for myself, Stephen George. We'll do it all again in 7 days. Take care. Bye bye.